What's up, MMO Attack fans? This is Zach here, bringing you guys a first impressions video for Rift, a former pay-to-play MMORPG that just made the transition to free-to-play as of June 11th, published and developed by Tryon Interactive. We're going to go ahead and create a character, and I'm going to show you guys the first few minutes of the game. And I had to pick an Oceanic server because there's so many people right now. Just about every other server in the game has a pretty long queue involved. So we're just going to go ahead and click create. And right here it's going to ask us which one of the two factions we want to join. Guardians or Defiant. Without going into a really long explanation of the story, essentially think of it like this. Guardians are the Alliance and Defiants are the Horde. Of course, you could throw in there that Defiants are like from the future, which makes things a little bit different. But essentially, that's the way it goes. The Guardians are sort of the good guys, and the Defiants are sort of the evil guys, even if you really can't classify it in the purest sense. We're going to go ahead and pick Guardian, and here's essentially character creation. Rift does not really have the best character creation. I suppose it's about as good as something in WoW, if not maybe on par with it. If it isn't better, it's probably at least on par. There's about 3 races you can pick from. You got the Mythosian, which are essentially the humans. The High Elves, which are elves. They're kind of tall and lanky. They're not really my favorite characters. And then you have the Dwarfs. And you also have male and female variants of each. And every time I want to go over the character creation, for some reason I always try to say that the male and females are 2 completely different races. But we'll go with the humans. And we'll click next. Alright, essentially here's where you pick your calling, in other words, your base class. Now there are 4 base classes in Rift. There's the Warrior, the Cleric, the Mage, and the Rogue, and they all fit standard MMO archetypes. The Warrior's the tank, or melee DPS. The Cleric is mostly the healer, can do some DPS as well. Again, the Mage is mostly DPS and support, and the Rogue is physical DPS in terms of melee or in terms of range, and can also be a support class as well. And within each calling, within each archetype, there are a wide variety of souls within which you can choose. And that's the beauty of Rift, in that it has the soul system, which allows you to sort of mix and match various souls into different builds, and you can totally customize your character however you want. Or at least you can go on the forums and read a build guide for when you start raiding, because chances are if you're not running one of those builds, you're probably not going to get a spot in the raid, but that's not the point. So we're just going to go ahead and select Warrior. It's got a little gear preview thing here, which kind of reminds me of some of those Asian free-to-play games, but it is pretty cool just to see what your gear looks like. Gear in this game has always kind of reminded me of Dragon Age. I mean, I don't know if you guys feel the same way. You can tell me what you think. But we're just going to go ahead and click Next. And essentially, here is where we pick our starting souls. And you can sort of tell what kind of soul this is. In other words, is it DPS? Is it support? Is it a tank? Is it a healer? The sword means DPS. The flag means support. And the little shield means tank. And you can go through here, and there's all sorts of, or on the right side there's a little description of what what each soul is actually for. But I think we're just going to go ahead and pick, let's pick the Pathfinder. That actually looks pretty cool. It says the support warrior who fights alongside their primal companion, granting aid to their allies while overwhelming their foes with steel and claw. Here's character creation. Now character creation, like I said, it's not really, I don't know if it's better than WoW. It's on par with it, and this is why. It seems to want to do everything by this weird little slider thing here on the top left. And as you can sort of see, I'm morphing the guy's face. But, I mean, he really doesn't, no matter where I go with this little thing here, he really doesn't look all that different. But we can just sort of play with this to get his face looking like we want it. And then we can change his eye color. We can change his eye size. his eye rotation. I mean, yeah, again, there's a lot of options, a lot more options than in something like WoW or Lord of the Rings. But they don't really seem to do a whole lot. Like, their heads are so small anyway. I mean, when you zoom out, in my opinion, Rift has always been notorious for having some rather small character models. So we can go ahead and change his hairstyle. There is about 13 different hairstyles available. Let's just stick with, I like that long hair. Let's go with that. And we can change the base hair color and highlight color. We're just going to play around. That looks pretty good. We'll stick with that. Markings, essentially that little tattoo on my face there. Let's see. What do we want? We want something dark. Okay. And then we can pick different markings if we want to. Is there not an option to where we don't have any? I'm not seeing one. But we'll go with that. And then we can change facial hair. So let's take a look at all the different facial hair options we have available. I'm just cycling through them real quick. We're going to stick with this one. You can change skin color if you want, but I think for the most part we're pretty much done. So I'm just going to go ahead and input a name, and I'm going to click next. It's creating the new character for us, and it looks like it's going to go ahead and log us into the game. It's a little cutscene here that's going to explain the basic premise behind the game's story, but we're going to go ahead and skip that because it's fairly long. It's going to load the new area for us now. I like the loading screens in this game. They sort of give you a preview of the area that you're going to be in before you're there. Alright, and here we are. It should be noted that this game uses the Gamebryo engine, which is the same game engine behind Warhammer Online. So it sort of has a similar feel, even though I wouldn't really compare the games at all. And also some single player games use the Gamebryo engine, like Oblivion and Divinity 2 as well. Okay, so we're going to go talk to this chick here who's just kind of floating around like she's some kind of an angel. And you can see even on the Oceanic server, there's plenty of players running around. This game, again, just made the transition to free-to-play. So, I mean, there's tons of people checking the game out. Whether they've ever played Rift or not, it's not really the point. There's just going to be tons of new and curious players. This is almost like a relaunch for the game. So if you've always wanted to try Rift, now is definitely the time. If you missed out on launch and you really want to try the game when you know it's going to have a healthy player base, I suggest you jump in now and give it a shot. Essentially, we just got a quest to kill 4 of these Ashen Defilers. So again, right out of the gate, I mean, what we're doing is pretty standard stuff. Kill X of Y. Rift is not a very imaginative game, and I hope I didn't insult anyone by saying that. Essentially, what I mean is Rift doesn't really pull a lot of punches. I mean, yeah, it's got the soul system, which is really cool if you're somebody that really likes min-maxing their character builds. That's not me. I prefer the shortest path between A to B because essentially, in that regard anyway, talking about character builds, there's not really a whole lot of viable ones in the long run anyway. You're going to want to go on the internet and find the best one as it is, and I just despawned my pet. But anyway, what I mean is, other than that, there's not really a whole lot of groundbreaking, game-changing features in Rift. I mean, its namesake, Rift, essentially means public quest. You'll have these randomly spawning public quests, and if you ever saw one, you'll know, when I say Rift, you know what I mean by Rift. I mean, a giant rift appears in the sky, and lots of enemies pop out. And essentially, it's just kill waves of you just kill waves and waves of mobs until you're done, and then you get some loot. Now, this was really, really cool when the game first came out, and you can probably experience a lot of this now. But when the game first came out, you had rift raids, even at low levels, and that was a really cool way to level up, and you level up really, really fast. In other words, you go out into the wilds, and you just run across some guys, and Rift has this really unique feature in that, well, I don't know how unique it is, but it's a really cool feature, and that you can simply run up on a group, and if they're not full, you can request to join the party right then and there, and then you can join a party without even searching for one if you just run up across one. And then you do that, and you guys can follow each other around, and some guys are going to join, and some more guys are going to leave, and things of that nature. And you can do that for hours, just killing and closing rifts. And it's a really great way to level up early on, and if you guys can do that, I recommend you do. But like I was saying, though, beyond that, or at the end game, rifts aren't really that big of a deal. Well, let's say rifts are not that big of a deal. And also the game has these instant adventures, which are sort of like, it's sort of like a queue, I guess, to be in a Rift raid, or the closest approximation of one. It's the best way I can describe it. And it also has the Chronicle system, which are essentially two-man versions of low-tier raids. And while I think that's really cool, and if you've got a friend, a close friend that's playing this game with you, I think that's a really great idea. Something cool that the two of you guys could do together. But essentially, instant adventures, rifts, and things of that nature don't really play a huge role at in-game. In-game is really your standard dungeon grind and raid grind for items. Just like World of Warcraft. Not very much not a big difference at all. If you're somebody that really likes that style of gameplay, if you're somebody that really likes the raiding game, Rift is a great game to try. A lot of ex-WoW players, specifically a lot of ex-WoW players that think WoW is too easy now, are playing Rift right now. Because essentially Rift, the raids in Rift are a lot more difficult, reportedly, than the raids in WoW. So if that's you, if you're somebody, again, that thinks WoW's too easy but you love raiding, give Rift a shot, level up a character to max level, run a few raids, and see what you think. I mean, you might be surprised. The game does have some pretty cool content, and it's even the leveling, while, again, it's not something that I would particularly say is overly difficult. Leveling is frustrating, especially starting out, because there seems to be, unless they've changed it, there seems to be a lot more mobs in a densely packed area than there ought to be, and you're going to die a lot more than likely, simply because you're going to get overwhelmed by mobs, unless you have a pretty decent character build where you can AoE the guys down pretty quick. I find that when you get to a high level, potentially when you start doing the content for Storm Legion, which is the game's first expansion, I find that the mob density, at least in the areas that I have seen, I find that the mob density is somewhat lessened. However, and again, this will appeal to some people, I think. Storm Legion is from levels, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's from levels 50 to 60. And leveling takes a while. You're probably not going to reach the level cap in a couple of days like WoW. I mean, from 50 to 60 is a pretty hefty grind. And the way the quests are structured has also changed. In Vanilla Rift, questing is very much like Cataclysm WoW. You'll run from point A to point B. When you get to point B, you'll do a quest or two, and then you'll run back, and then more quests will open up, and then you'll run back, and then more quests will open up, and then you get one little quest that says, okay, you need to head over to this area, and then you continue on and on and on ad nauseum. Well, Rift, and this took me a little bit to get a hang of, Rift does things a little bit differently, and I think it's an attempt to sort of mimic Guild Wars 2 in a sense, in that you still get some quests from going to from quest hub to quest hub. That's really how you complete the main story missions. But there are things called Carnage quests, which you'll do on the way from point A to point B. In addition to some other quests which you'll find scattered throughout on your way from one place to the other. And I don't like it. Particularly because a lot of these Carnage quests, there's just so many of them, and they require you to kill so many mobs, it really feels like a grind. Secondly, you can easily miss things, and then you can sort of fall out of that appropriate level range that you're supposed to be for certain content, and then you're left wondering, okay, you know, where was I supposed to go? What was I supposed to do? And why is everything, you know, a couple of levels ahead of me? But there again, I think for a certain audience, that's definitely appealing, even if it doesn't really appeal to me. Now, Rift is not my favorite MMORPG. It's one of, I think it's one of the best alternatives to something like WoW, and especially now that it's free to play. I mean, I can imagine that this game is going to be a great success as a free-to-play option because it is very, very polished for what it is. It just doesn't really appeal to me. I mean, I would rather play a lesser game, I think, than this even. I would rather play something like Terra, for example. Something that, a game that in particular isn't quite doing as well, never did have the same population. Even something like EverQuest 2, I think I'd rather play than this. This game just, to me, has always lacked a certain personality. I mean, graphically speaking, it's fairly impressive. I think some areas are more impressive than others. It looks sort of unfinished in some ways. Tryon sort of always has straddled that line in my mind as being sort of in between a major AAA publisher and like an indie company. Perhaps I'm the only one that thinks this, but I don't really put Tryon in the same category as I would put a AAA MMO developer like SOE or Funcom, and certainly not Blizzard. So I just got some armor there from that quest. It looks like it automatically equipped on me. That was weird. Especially some of the low-level armor, like this is supposed to be plate mail. I find it sort of funny that it stretches because, to my knowledge, plate mail doesn't usually stretch in real life, but there you go. So, I think with the remainder of the time we have, we're going to go ahead and talk about the Rift store. Now, I don't really have a lot of experience with the Rift store. In fact, when I click this button here, this is really going to be the first I've seen of it. But I can tell you this. I can tell you that the particular currency that Rift uses to buy items, you can purchase those. You can purchase that currency, and then it can be sold or traded to other players for which they can use to purchase items as well. So of course you can take a look at some services. You've got patron passes, 15 days of patron status, in other words like a subscriber, unlocks additional character slots, unlocks souls from the Storm Legion expansion, things of that nature. Still don't, oh, they do have faction changing scrolls. Awesome. Wow, I've been waiting for that in Rift for a long time. Faction changing scrolls. That is amazing. I'm so glad they have that now. Let's take a look at what else they have. We can go home and XP boosts and things of that nature, I would imagine. Token tablet. Let's see. Currency gain from all sources by 40%. PvP items. Wow, this is complex. Let's see. Okay, well, you can buy PvP currency used to purchase goods from PvP vendors. Well, apparently you can buy PvP gear here as well, but it doesn't look, I mean, it looks like that's pretty much legit, like stuff that you actually get from playing the game. Let's see. Armor. See if armor functions the same way. There again, favor. Same deal. Of course, I'm still in PvP. So let's go back home. Wardrobe. Essentially, some appearance armor. Stuff looks kind of cool. I have 2,529 worth in the currency. I'm not quite sure if I just got that because I used to be a subscriber or if they gave everyone that much currency to start off. However, that's really a generous amount, and there's tons of stuff I could buy. Really, I'm mostly interested in that faction change, and I may partake in that a little while later. But as you can see, all the different numbers of things that you can actually purchase. Cool looking gear, I have to say. Which is sort of something I always worry. Take a game like Age of Conan, which the armor designs, at least for a lot of free players, is absolutely awful. And if you want some really cool looking armor, you gotta pay money. And a lot of free games are like that, especially a lot of the Korean games, like a lot of the games from Perfect World. The best looking armor requires you to pay lots and lots of money. But yeah, there's mounts here and lots of cool things. Just take a look at some of these mounts. They look really cool. There again, I said I was going to get a faction change, but if I log back into this later and make one of these cool looking mounts, I could almost afford more than one of them. That's really cool. And essentially, the guys at Tryon promised that there would be no game-breaking items, that you as a free player will have access to all levels and all content. You don't have to worry about lots of artificial restrictions like a lot of publishers, SOE, I mean, a lot of publishers and developers put on their free-to-play titles to sort of encourage you to subscribe or to encourage you to switch to some sort of an alternate payment plan which costs a little bit more money one way or the other. The guys at Tryon promise to stay on the up and up. And Tryon, as much as I've bashed them, they're an honest company. They're one of the better companies out there, I think, that you could play an MMO from. There again, Rift is just not particularly my game, but it's for certain people. Like again, you can press the N key, and this is what I'm talking about, the soul tree. Used to, you'd have to buy all of these souls individually. Now I think they just said screw it and gave them all to you and just said here you go. I think this can be confusing to new players to have access to all of this fancy stuff right off the bat. I mean, the guys at Blizzard pretty much said, hey, our talent trees are too convoluted, let's dumb them down. And a lot of people complain about that, but Rift kind of took the other perspective. It's like, hey, the talent trees in WoW, they're not complicated enough. Let's make them, let's have 3 times if not more than that, when you start getting into the number of different specs that you can actually have per character, which, believe me, is more than 2. You can have several different specs. But they did alleviate that somewhat. You can click the presets button, and it's going to give you some preset, essentially classes, I guess you could say, or builds to pick from that I think are beneficial to new players. I don't know if I would feel comfortable using these particular builds at a high level at in-game, but I think for new players who are easing themselves into the system, this is really, really cool. Because like I said, you can select one of these, and like this one here, and essentially it's just going to reload all of your skills and abilities. And of course we don't want to save it. But if you were to do that, then you would essentially get new skills, and it would be like a new class. And there again, you'll find that it's not a good idea to master just one role. There's situations in Rift where you'll be thinking, hey, you know, I'm playing support right now. Like I'm a rogue who's playing a bard, and I'm a support class, basically a mana battery and some backup healing. But hey, for this boss fight, you know, we don't need a backup healer or lots of buffs, no, or mana. We need more DPS because this boss is a DPS check, and maybe our current couple of DPS guys, maybe they're just not pulling their weight, so we need an extra DPS. And what Rift gives you that freedom to pop into your DPS spec, whatever that may be, and work from there. If you don't have a DPS spec, a lot of people are going to be wondering why not. Same thing if you need to interrupt a boss in a fight for a certain ability. If you don't have a spec with an interrupt ability and you're assigned interrupt duty, people are going to be wondering why not. So essentially in Rift, even though you can specialize, it's best to learn. You don't have to learn everything, every single individual class or soul combination, but it's a good idea to learn how to function in multiple roles. Like maybe you're playing a tank class, well, learn how to be a tank and learn how to be DPS, for example, because Rift is designed with the intentions for you to switch roles actively. It's designed with that in mind. It's a key selling point for the game. And that's essentially all the time I have for this first impressions video. If you guys want to check out more about Rift and the free-to-play option that's now available, head on over to Rift's official website. If you guys want to learn more about MMO Attack, head on over to MMOattack.com for more MMO gaming news, reviews, opinions, giveaways, and other awesomeness.